Test, test, test. Test, test, test.
We heard you for a second.
It's on.
Yep. We
Hello, everyone, and good evening. It is 6:02, a little late getting started. My apologies. I was engaged in quite a great conversation with Councilwoman Kesty. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Will you please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go into roll call. Councilman Loy,
Here.
Councilwoman Kesty,
Present.
Councilwoman Diamond,
Present.
Councilman Henderson,
Here.
Councilman Cock,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
and Councilman Lavaca.
Present.
Good, very good, thank you. Okay, we do not have any special guests tonight, and in fact, we've got an interesting session because Charlie, who's going to be leading through most of the agenda, is online. He's actually in Port Townsend right now at a training conference. And so, Charlie, hello. Can you hear us? And do you want to begin here with? Oh, wait a minute. Let me. With the unfinished business, the request for May 8th council discussion, updating the city's authorized position list. I'm so sorry. I slept 2 hours last night. it's showing. Sorry, Charlie.
yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Council, good evening. The first item on there, the unfinished business item, was just an information request to the council. We're looking to bring that position request back for further discussion on the 8th, so next week. And we won't have Kelly Conklin, our finance director, there for that meeting. So it's just a request. If you do have questions that we can answer ahead of the meeting on that topic, if there's any way you can send them to us in writing ahead of time, we'll be able to get Kelly's input on that stuff ahead of the meeting and hopefully keep it moving. But worst case scenario, we can just bump that item if we run into questions at the meeting that we can't answer there without Kelly. So that's all it is just an information request.
All right, thank you. So moving on to new business, first item on that is to discuss the COPS hiring grant. Chief Dan is also online. Good evening, Chief. Would you like to take us through this agenda item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I hope you can hear me as well. So this is just, I'm looking at opportunities that can help the city find funding for additional staffing for police. The COPS hiring program is one of those areas that we can reach into that comes up every year. Part of that program is to hire and retain additional sworn officers to your existing department. So what that means, it has to be an additional position to the department, and it's partially funding that through the grant process. So what that kind of entails is they will match up to $125,000 over the 3-year period of an officer if this grant is awarded. And so it's still a significant amount that the city would be responsible for. But in that process, you're also gaining $125,000 toward, or $150,000 towards that. $125,000 towards that position. So it helps us get that. And then after the 3 years, after that person is hired, that officer, we would have to sustain that. So we'd have to keep that person on. So it's another way that we can potentially increase our police staffing by applying for the grant and getting approval. one of the things to note, there is a waiver where you can ask for more funding in that. So getting a waiver to get additional funding, that would be my purpose in there, to get as much funding as possible, hopefully over the 125,000, and see if we can get that. The most important thing is this is just the application. I think overall, you as a council and mayor would have overall decision in the end, whether we accept the terms of the grant or not. So I'm really just at this point asking permission to venture into this grant writing position and proposal, and seeing if we even get the grant, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking to increase our staffing through another method and get some federal funding for that.
Okay, thank you. And this is actually right now you were asking for one position according to this grant. Is that the amount that you're asking in this grant? Is that correct?
That's correct, because one, I think it still is a lot to sustain in the end. But if we get that waiver, it could be more. And also, I do believe we are probably going to consider trying to add a new officer within the three years time period anyway. So this could save the city some money in the process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Dan?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Chief. What would be your timeline for seeing the grant come back, positive or negative?
It would be this year. I think the decision making on there, the grant deadline is in June. So we should have an answer for the fiscal year, federal year 2024. So that's usually September. We would know, and those funds would be available to us for year 2025. It also gives us a 5-year time period to fill that position, right? So it allows us time to hire for that purpose, knowing that we have a vacancy and potentially another vacancy. It allows us time for us to work towards that before we're having to share our portion of that.
Okay, and you said that was 225,000 over 3 years is what the funding would be?
No, sorry if it sounded garbled or whatever. We're on Wi-Fi. $125,000 over 3 years. What I did work up is just kind of estimate costs of salary and fringe benefits, because that's what they cover. Officer is going to cost right around $150,000 per year. So that's $450K over those 3 years. If we just got the total max that they're applying without a waiver, that'd be $125,000 towards that. So the city would be responsible for about $325,000. That's just simple math.
Thank you.
Over 3 year period.
Yeah, over a 3-year period.
Hello, I had a quick question, Chief. Does the money, do we get it up front, or does it kick in once the officer is hired? I mean, because it seems like a benefit would be to wait until you get the right person.
Right. It'd be an additional position, so it wouldn't kick in until you hire that COPS grant designated person. Okay. So yes, we'd have to fill our current vacancies. It'd be additional officer to our current budget allowed.
Well, this sounds like we're probably going to need an additional police officer anyway, and this would offset some of the funding. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Lavaca?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, with that, you already answered a couple of the questions with Paul's question. So we wouldn't be able to apply that to existing position we have yet to fill. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's not for supplanting. That's one of the definitions. There has to be an additional position to the officer to assist with community policing and crime prevention.
So would that also enter another vehicle to help with the staffing increase?
Yes, there would be some one-time costs associated to that. I don't have that in front of me, but it'd be consistent to what I had worked up with the SRO proposal and such.
Okay, it'd just be the full amount rather than the SO. I don't know if the
There'd be a one-time expense for the equipment, right?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Lloyd?
Yeah, Chief, with any grant, we can apply for any grant, but doesn't mean we have to accept it. Is there any repercussions if for some reason we ever turn down a grant? Like you'll never
I
get
don't
it from
believe
us?
so, from what I heard. Charlie did mention that as well. I don't think we want to, if we can do it, we should do it. But I know Burlington has done this and did not accept the grant, and they have reapplied and they got it. So it didn't stop them from doing it again.
I've always wanted to ask that question.
That's just my only knowledge, just from what I've heard from the Chief Rivera at Burlington.
Councilman Burns?
I'd support this if you're going to ask for the waiver. I'd say it's at least worth a shot, see what they say.
Okay. You are looking for action tonight, is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, since it's such a short time period, I'd like to start working on it. I basically just have the month of May to work on it and submit it. So yeah, I'm asking for just that approval and action to move forward with that. And I will ask for the waiver because I think that is important as well.
Okay.
I have one more question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, please.
So on that staffing that you currently have, or the proposed staffing over the next 5-year outlook, I believe you guys had something like that. How does this relate into that? You said we'd probably need somebody, but if you don't get the grant, we're still fully staffed, minus, we have enough positions, and we might not have that one staffed yet, but with that positions filled, we'd have plenty of police officers for accommodating the growth in the community. Is that correct?
I think as the city continues to grow, we're already, running out of bench, right? So I think even as a city in every department, they're experiencing shortness of staff. So I do expect that we will need to grow our police department beyond our 20 budgeted officers right now.
Okay. So, and then after the one-time use, which could be a vehicle and then equipment, possibly more training, which would be a significant cost on the budget, then we would also add in post 3 years the full salary, but in that 3 years, if it's 125 on 450, we would be comping the rest of that going forward. Do we have that in the budget? I mean, is this a reasonable request? With, like Chief was saying, there's a lot of people requesting more staffing. I think there's a request today for that HR position again.
Okay, quite true.
Yeah. I think we all have to figure out sustainability, right? I don't think it hurts to apply, and we can figure some of that out. We're talking about a budget year, probably 2026, 27, the future, that we'd have to figure that portion of it out.
Awesome.
At
Yeah.
earliest.
Yeah, I agree. There, if we're looking at doing that, but it would commit those funding if we take the grant and then accept the grant. It would commit that funding over to that position. And I just want to make sure with the executive branch, they're not going to be looking to fill other positions that we could be tied on the police force, but we could be in a deficit in, say, planning or finance or something. Are you guys? That's what I'm asking. Are you comfortable with the request and the staffing if we were to put that funding, allocate the funding?
Yeah, the beauty of the grant is that it covers the bulk of it.
Well, it covers 125 over a 3-year. The bulk is, there's 450, not including equipment. So it really wouldn't cover a whole lot, maybe 20%, 15% possibly with equipment. I don't know about that, but then we would need another officer after 3 or 4 years. So we would eventually be spending that money or be requesting that money eventually.
Yeah, and I do know something to keep in mind, bear in mind, is that there's quite a shift going on within police departments, and so I actually think this is a wise move on the part of the chief, simply because we do know that we have other officers that are being courted, they're being asked to leave, and so we may find that we may not be fully staffed even with bringing on this officer, which then we would still have that funding that isn't being put out for whatever officers may be gone. So I really appreciate what you're sharing here, because it's caution for us. So if it's looking like we will not be able to, a year from now, be able to sustain this, however, we've got an officer who has left, we just won't fill that role. So we can continue on. So I appreciate what you're asking us to do, is think ahead here and have a good vision and think about where we're going to have that funding.
Yeah, it could be a $500,000 increase over a short term on our budget. So, and I know we have like 42, but still. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
have if we have a budgeted officer that leaves, we still have that in the budget to rehire for.
We do.
So, but, Chief, so if you apply for this, then you'll bring it back with the fiscal impact, and we'll get a whole presentation on what it's gonna cost and if we can afford it, and we'll have finance here to look up all the other stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah, all those questions are going to have to be answered, right? And I think that's necessary. I think right now, and I'm just asking to move forward the process and see if we are even there, right? If we even get the waiver and such, and thinking ahead.
Okay.
Chief, for my clarification, is this 125,000 per year or is it total?
Total over the 3-year period.
I see. Okay, I was misunderstanding. I thought you were saying 125 a year. Thank you.
Hi, Chief. Can you apply again for an extension after the 3 years?
After 5 years, so we'd have 5 years to fill that position. What's also unique about this is we could, I mean, if we really wanted to, we could apply again next year for another officer and stagger. I don't think we're there. I think that's looking a little bit further ahead. But we have 5 years to fill that position. And we do not use our funds. We don't have to match or anything until we hire that position. So right now, that would be our 21st officer or 22nd officer if the SRO goes through.
Okay, thank you.
But each grant equals 1 FTE, so you apply for this one this year and you get it, and then you apply for
Yep.
another grant next year. That means another officer, not applying both grants to the same person.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right. This grant comes up every year. So there's opportunities out there. Because, over a year, sometimes things change. More growth, there may be more revenue, who knows? I think right now we're sticking with the one right now and figure out that process later.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I make a motion?
You certainly can.
I'd like to make a motion to ask the chief to move ahead of this, asking in particular for the waiver and provide an analysis of the financial impact to the city if we go forward with it.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilman Cox, second by Councilman Henderson. Is there any more discussion? All those in, yes?
Can you tell us what the waiver was again, one more time?
The waiver?
The waiver is to get funding more than the 125,000. So if we are able to present that we do not have enough to cover the amount, they can increase the amount. So, but it's on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Technically, I think we could get up to it. In worst case circumstances, I think they could do the whole position. So who knows?
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right. Thank you, Chief. You have the approval to move forward with the grant.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the second item under new business, which is the recommendation for AWC's Hijacked by Hate Speech webinar suggestions that they made. This is a discussion, and the issue here would be, should the council take further action as a result of the AWC's Hijacked by Hate Speech webinar, as seen by the slideshows and the other information that was sent to you? Is this something that well, let's just move forward with this. Charlie, do you want to add to this? Is this something that we need to probably discuss, given the amount of Zoom bombing that's been happening around the Pacific Northwest and across the state of Washington, actually across the United States?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Council, I went ahead and assembled the information that the mayor sent out so that the council could, I know you all received an email, but the public could see it as well. There were a couple of PowerPoint presentations that were included in the information. At the end of those PowerPoints, there were some recommendations, and We just wanted to run those by you in case the council wants to elect to do any of those things or have a discussion about those things. I also included a council governance handbook. That's the very most likely place where we would make changes to reflect anything that we want to do differently in terms of council process and procedure during meetings. And we've been working on a updated version of the handbook as well. And so I included that, and that's mainly formatting changes and some other stuff, but wanted to just share that to council this evening. We're not looking for action on that, but we would likely start editing the handbook if the council would like to move forward. So for tonight, we're really looking for guidance from the council, any feedback, any thoughts, if you've got them, if there's consensus or at least a strong majority that wants to work on this stuff, you can give us direction and we can go off and update the handbook and bring it back to you.
So any thoughts, comments?
I attended the Zoom AWC thing on hate, and it was interesting listening to the varying problems that other jurisdictions had. I hope I get this right. One mayor or council person said that in their public meetings, there's a person who shows up every day and tells one of the council members that they are a murderer. And then there's another council where two wives of council members show up and attack the other council members. So, and then the Zoom bombing that occurred was horrific, highly anti-Semitic. And, my sense with the council in our last discussion, and I agree as a former newspaper editor, that we have to protect the First Amendment. So if there's not support for, the recommendation or one recommendation to go to a limited public forum, which means people can just discuss what's on the agenda or city business, then at the least I would just suggest that we be prepared in some way for when it does happen. Do we vote to end it? Do we have a statement about, that we don't share this kind of belief? Do we, if it occurs in person, how do we handle it? So that is just, if it occurs, I'd rather have something in place to respond to it rather than nothing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, both you and Councilman Burns were on that. I saw where both of you were on it. Councilman Burns, do you have any thoughts regarding what you
I think the thing I would most be open to is eliminating the remote public comment, except for in the requirements for RCW 423240, which allows an individual for whom physical attendance is difficult to request remote public comment. Otherwise, somebody wants to come here and tell me why I'm terrible, that's fine, at least they're looking me in the eye. We have a less likely chance of the problems like the Zoom bombing that we've heard about, where it's somebody on the other side of the planet or across the country who's just having a good time doing something terrible.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that was probably, I agree with you as far as the First Amendment. We do need to protect that, and I am really anxious to hear what the council has to say about that, where they see that landing for us. But one thing that was brought up that I think is really important to see is for those who do actually give public comment online, that they have to turn their camera on. This is the problem that they're running into with the Zoom bombing, is that they do not turn their camera on, and it's just their mic, and they go on and on and on. So the other thing that we have looked to do is Zoom webbing, web zooming. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct. It's a webinar Zoom, and it will allow, if things get really ugly, really out of line, then we have the right to turn their mic off at some point. So, I don't know. What's the council's thoughts on
So
this?
what's the difference between using Zoom and Zoom webinar? Can you not call in from your phone then?
Well, I don't know. Thomas, would they still be able to Zoom? I don't know if they would. That's a good question. Call them from the phone. They should, because we do give that number.
Right.
I apologize, I didn't quite hear the question.
So we're wondering with the Zoom webinar, if people can still call in using their phone.
I believe with their phone, we have not tested that particular aspect of it, but I believe with their phone, they would join as a attendee without the ability to raise their hand. We could still turn on their mic or turn off their mic like we can now, but they wouldn't be able to denote that they would like to speak. So the possibility of that is very low. If you join with the app, there is a raise hand button to denote that you would like to speak or chime in some way, and then we manually enable your mic. If you're not doing that, there's very low chance we'll enable their mic.
Yeah.
Oh, can I ask a quick question? This is from my former life. Do we, if somebody is on Zoom, say they from wherever, do we have their, whatever it's called in technical parlance, their IP address or whatever? The reason I'm asking is in case there's a threat made online to us.
Part of the Zoom webinar is to gather data on that. As far as exactly what is gathered, I would need to defer to the IT director when he is back.
Yeah.
But that was one of our goals, was to gather information like that in the exact case that we're talking about here. So that is, if it's not something we are getting now, it is something we are looking to get.
Okay, thank you.
But again, I would defer to the director on that one.
So kind of going back to the question regarding, wouldn't be able to raise their hand, one of the suggestions that was made through the AWC webinar was that individuals who are going to be calling in need to email IT by 3 o'clock in the afternoon so they can watch for them as they come online and know that they are going to give public comments. So their mic can be turned on since they have no other way of letting us know that they want to give public comment. Yeah.
I believe that should be doable. We can begin looking into how that will actually flow up here in IT and provide some hopefully useful insight to make sure that it's smooth, non-disruptive, and actually beneficial to the discussion.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, that should be a totally doable workaround for now.
Right. So, Councilman Loy.
Yes, I know originally I heard about, their shenanigans in Stanwood, but other than that, I haven't heard of any specific incidences. How much of this stuff is really going on and how much of it's just talk?
Well, the webinar that we sat in on, there were several cities that were represented, Anacortes being one of them, and they've been Zoom bombed. And almost all of them, there were very few of us that had not been Zoom bombed. Most of them had been. It was kind of interesting. Or they had experienced, as Councilman Koch was talking about, some sort of consistent threats or words or actions that were occurring that were not pertinent to the business at hand that the council was working on. It was more personally directed at the other council members. So there's a lot. I realize this is a lot of information, and of course, Councilman Burns and Councilman Koch and I had the opportunity to sit in on the webinar, so we were able to hear and share this information. But this is just a discussion to begin with, and I'm hoping that the council members would be able to maybe go through their packets again, kind of look at it, see how you would like to word or change or advise us as to how we might talk about how to handle public comment, how to handle Zoom situations, how to handle Zoom bombing situations. So is council willing to do that or willing to engage in that?
Yeah, I'd like to look at this some more, especially go over which different governance handbooks, what all the changes are. Is a lot to read.
Yeah, it is. I realize it's a lot of material, and I apologize for that.
One of the things that I can say that I'm not a fan of is restricting what public comment to only the agenda items or what's on the agenda, because if somebody has a grievance, they want to come in, and say whatever, is on their mind or whatever they have to say to the people that are representing them. They have every right to do so. And limiting it to what is on the agenda, it can be controlled to what the people who are coming in are only allowed to talk about. And I don't feel that that's right.
Good, good. That's good to know. Good comment.
Yeah, I'm also not a fan of that.
No.
And I did have one question that'll have to go to our legal counsel. I agree. If somebody has a beef with us and they want to come in and it's not on the agenda, I think they should be able to tell us about it. Because it might bring up something that we need to be aware of, right? 'Cause
Exactly.
we're not all knowing.
Exactly.
But the issue with, say, a Zoom bombing occurs, I guess I'm just not clear on, say it's just horrific and we're all shocked. What are the implications of cutting them off, in terms of First Amendment? That's where it gets tricky for me, because even courts don't really understand it. There's the famous statement by former Supreme Court Justice Potter, and they asked him what was pornography. He said, "I don't know, but I know it when I see it."
Yeah.
So how do we know, at what point are we protected on First Amendment if it's really horrific? Because First Amendment is very, very forgiving in terms of the courts have said, no, First Amendment first, and for good reason. And so I'd like to know that if we have to do it, or do we just sit there and endure it for 3 minutes and cut it off, and then that's it.
Right. Something that I read that I think is really good is doing just as you say. We let them give their 3 minutes and then we cut them off. And there is actually a statement that is read by the mayor that talks about that we don't condone that.
Right.
People are free to say whatever they want to say, but we do not condone certain things.
That's what I was talking about, is
Yeah.
if you,
Yeah.
and I, like I said, I agree that I don't think sticking to the agenda is fair to our citizens, but I think we have to be prepared in case it does happen with a statement or something like that.
Okay.
Madam
Any
Mayor?
comments?
Thank you. So yeah, I would agree with Councilman Henderson and Joe, or Councilman Burns on people coming in. Yeah, they should be able to speak freely, and oftentimes they do. We haven't had any problems. On Zoom, it would be nice to know that they are visible, but even at that, I'm still a little bit torn because we've had this conversation a few times based upon an incident that happened in Stanwood, and these can be negative for sure, but they're not like. It's not like this growing threat that we're getting in front of to combat, but we keep coming back to the same discussion. And it seems like the council is like, well, let's talk about it. We even had executive session. We talked about it more. We've talked about a number of things, and then all of a sudden we're talking about it again. I thought that we kind of had an idea that we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And I do think that it would be horrible if people, kids or whoever had to endure that, but the parents also have the right to turn off that computer or whatnot, and until we actually face something like that, it's hard to make those decisions. It seems like we're preemptively looking to take away rights before they happen. I would like to, see that people do have the respect for the council and respect for their communities to be able to do that. So far they have. And it just seems like, I think we've talked about this for, is this the fourth occasion? We don't talk about things nearly that much when it comes to business at hand, directors or improvements and bills, and so it just keeps coming back around the table. I understand the desire, but it does keep coming back around.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate what everybody is saying, and I kind of agree with the fact that let them come in, say what they want. It's 3 minutes, and then you could potentially have a statement that says, it's going to be obvious that we do not agree with what is happening. And so if we're prepared for that, don't borrow trouble. Just be prepared.
Okay. All right. Okay.
If nobody else has anything. Yeah, I would say, just like I did the last couple of times, that when we have this happen, we kind of tough it out. And then we make a reasonable, educated decision, not overreact and cut down everything and have the, told you so or whatnot. But if it happens, we can have that discussion. until that time, I think our community can suffer one meeting that's uncomfortable and then make reasonable decisions based upon that, see how it goes. So I would table it. I know it's just discussion tonight, but.
All right, so we will probably come back then. Would it be all right if we come back with the recommendations, and then based upon that, you can polish, edit, do what you want to do with it? Or how would you like to handle this?
I would at least have a statement developed with legal counsel.
Okay,
And then I would put a motion forward that we table our plan until it actually happens. And then at that point, have a reasonable adult conversation about how best to proceed. We can even call together an emergency meeting after that during that week to discuss a further course of action. But not to keep bringing the same subject that the council seemed to agree that we don't want to necessarily pursue it right now because it would be infringing upon people's rights.
Or
That's how I at least interpreted it last time.
or an executive session after said meeting.
Or we can have an
We
executive
can always
session
call
after
an
the-
executive session, can't we?
you certainly can.
And then, Councilman Cock, you're talking about having a statement ready, or maybe just like a legal disclaimer
That's right.
that we would just say, hey, this person is talking on their own. This isn't the city's endorsement.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, all right, I think there's nothing else. We are going to move on to item number 3, which is the interlocal agreement with Skagit County. And it is the 1590 fund, funding support for North Star project. So Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. So this is an action item that we're bringing forward to you. It was discussed a little bit at the last meeting. You received a presentation at the last meeting regarding the interlocal agreement we've had with the county to support the NOFA process. You'll recall George from the county health department's presentation at the last council meeting. And he's talking about the agencies funded by the money that the city's provided. House Bill 1590 is a housing support bill where the city has received funding and continues to receive funding. We're able to spend 40% of that funding for operations to support affordable housing, and then we must spend at least 60%, if not more, on capital expenditures. And I mention that because you're going to see another action item coming in the near future related to that. But this is focused on a contract that expires at the end of June, and the potential to do another contract that would run another year from July 1st until June 30th that would support the NOFA process for the county during that time period. So basically, they're 2024 NOFA and provide funding to regional human services agencies that provide affordable housing throughout the next year. And then, of course, there'd be another report back to you on that. I took the existing interlocal agreement that we have currently in place and made some updates to it. And I received email from the county late yesterday with some additional updates. So we sent that out as late material today. Imagining most of you have not had a chance to see that. The county's updates, some of them were just housekeeping. Some titles have changed and just trying to narrow the scope a little bit. We had referenced the county doing certain things last time that were just related to human services and housing, but weren't necessarily specifically what they were doing for us. So they've proposed to just focus this more on what they're doing for us specifically. And that's essentially it. I did run them by the city attorney. She didn't have any concerns. We're not asking for action tonight, but we did want to get feedback on this, see if this is a notion that the council wants to entertain going forward. And then if you do, then we would bring it back on the 8th for consideration.
Right. This is a follow-up to the presentation that we had at the last council meeting when George Kosovich came from county housing. Any questions? Yes, Councilman Burns.
Obviously, I'd like to read over the changes made by the county, but overall, I'm in agreement with supporting this program another year. I definitely want to see better numbers from them, but I understand they're just starting to get this off the ground. So I appreciate the effort.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Did North Star renew their charter after the 31st of December? I was reading on the county website about their charter expiring on the 31st of December of 2023.
Yeah, it's been,
It has?
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, because if you go on the county's website, anything about the North Star project is very spotty. Any information on like what's going on with it, it's all just little bullet points and stuff like that. So, I mean, so essentially, the last I was able to read of it on the county website was that their charter was expiring on the 31st. So they've since renewed it, and that's a definite yes, and we're all good with that. Yes, no, maybe so.
Yeah, I could do some double checking on that, but the mayor's directly involved in the North Star leadership group with the mayors.
Yeah.
So, and I know that Councilmember Cock is also joining that group, as are some other council members from around the region.
Yeah, he'll be on as an advisory with the advisory group. And I, because of the situation with my mother, was not at the first meeting that we had in February. I was at the one yesterday, and we're definitely moving forward. And I have a note here to ask them to update their website. So,
I'd just like to speak up that this is a sort of a collaborative, all-hands-on-deck effort to address a significant countywide problem, and I think we need to be continuous participants in this collaborative effort. I think it has a chance to make some successes that have not been shown in other cities where it's literally run out of control. Thank you.
yeah.
I'd like to see, since this is funded mostly by sales tax, or pretty much all by sales tax, that of money spent in Sedro-Woolley, it'd be nice to see Sedro-Woolley dollars stay in Sedro-Woolley to help out here.
Yeah, I thought George did a nice job of showing that with Helping Hands Food Bank and Family Promise and was it the housing that's going on here as well?
He did, but this money we're sending out and then hoping that we get some back in the similar way that we pay all of our taxes to the state and then have to try and get the money back in to our town. So,
Yeah, they're sending it back to us through the 1590 funding. And then we have the responsibility of taking that funding and putting it towards, as Charlie said, 40% towards the need for housing, for rent, which Family Promise does a beautiful job, Helping Hands does a beautiful job, and then the 60%, which, like Charlie said, we're going to be bringing that back because that's the capital piece of it, which cannot be used for rent, and we'll be talking about that probably at the next council meeting. Next council meeting or the last one of this month, Charlie? I can't remember what's on our agenda.
Yeah, the next council meeting
Yeah.
is when I'm looking to bring that one forward.
Yeah.
And to Councilmember Henderson's point,
Yeah.
we could add some intent language in here or try to strengthen the language to make it clear that the council's intent is
Sure.
to see these funds spent in Sedro-Woolley or in the area near Sedro-Woolley.
Yeah.
So if that would be helpful, I can add something like that in, send it back to the county before we get it on the next agenda.
Yeah, good, good. Thank you, Charlie. Yes.
I would actually like to see that intent language put in there with the funds coming back to our city to help our
community here. Two questions I have. One is, I know I've asked before what the administrative costs of North Star project actually are. I've never seen them. The very first meeting we ever had, they said there was zero, but I can't see that being zero. If there's time, energy, and effort put in, there's got to be a administrative fee or cost in there somewhere. So I'm curious as to what that is overall.
So that would, well, Charlie, I'll let you answer this, but I would say briefly, and then probably you can expand upon this. Yeah, so my time is spent there, so that's part of it. And Charlie is involved in putting those contracts together, so his time for writing it, and then really Kelly just kind of passing the money through. So
Right.
it really isn't a lot of time, there really isn't a lot of cost. And I actually see it as a good service to our community, knowing.
What's the administrative cost overall for the actual North Star project, the entity itself?
So it's actually the county that's supporting a lot of that. They're doing the bulk of the work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, one of the things, I did attend one of the North Star meetings before. One of the things I was actually very disappointed in is that I didn't hear anybody say a single thing about what they were doing in regards to lobbying for policy that would allow for stricter drug laws and criminal and more opportunity for intervening and providing mental health services and that sorts of stuff. And so I'm wondering if, since that I didn't make it to the last meeting, but I'm wondering if there has been any gathering of community to actually come together and lobby for stuff that's going to start at ground level and make it harder for this, because all we're doing is providing, we're providing services, and in a lot of places they are needed and can be a helping hand up, but in some places they're a helping hand out and continues the terrible cycle. And I would rather not see our tax dollars go into helping people continue to harm themselves and the community. And so
That's a great question.
I'm just wondering if there is a group through North Star that is actually working to lobby at the
Absolutely.
ground level so that we can work to getting back on track and actually reducing it. Because if we're actually looking to take care of the problem itself, we shouldn't be in the industry of housing people. We should be looking at the long term. How long is this really going to last us? And looking at this point, we should be coming back down out of it. And I'm just looking forward to seeing those sorts of projections.
That's a really good question, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. And yes, that's exactly what's happening. So, because that is the next step. For example, we can put money out there to get people who are homeless off the street, but where do we put them? Where are they getting treatment? Where are they getting services? We don't have those things in place. We Band-Aid a lot of things, and we are fully aware of that at North Star. So we're taking baby steps. We realize that this is going to be a process, but that is an excellent question, and that is our end goal. Our end goal is that people will have complete services. They will join they'll join society. They will be paying taxes. They will have jobs. They'll have healthier lives. It'll be a healthier community. That's our end goal. So that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing, too, in terms of, I do support as much money as possible coming back to Sedro-Woolley, but some of the services that they handle help people from Sedro-Woolley, like YMCA's Oasis Shelter for Children, for Youth. I guarantee you there's some Sedro-Woolley kids in there. And especially DVSAS, which handles emergency shelter for victims of domestic dating violence, rape, child sexual abuse, stalking. Those people, I get in situations where in a violent situation, where do they go? Where do they go with their kids? And I think that's critically important to continue adequately funding that piece of it. So I just say that it's not directly in Sedro-Woolley, but it is, because those are our citizens having to unfortunately endure that.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So, God's been working on my heart with this one because my brother's homeless. He has been for a long time. 20-something years. And I have a strong compassion to help him out. And if you guys ever met him, the nicest guy in the world, super kind, loving, just the guy you want to hug. I went up there to where he's at, and we walked all over the city, and I always get him clothes, always trying to do what I can. And we hung out. We had a wonderful day. It was awesome. And, but that's like, he's my family, and I love him. And I think that we are missing the root problem. This agency was started 45 years ago in the late 70s, and we've seen a tremendous growth in the homeless crisis, and it is a crisis what's going on. When I grew up, we had some homeless people, but they weren't like tent cities. Now, where he's at right now, he's at a tent city type deal, and it's cruel there. It's horrible there. The government has reached out and reached into him to help him at every turn. He's got a phone every other month. It's a different number. I stopped changing the number. Now I just put the date in, and my phone just goes down and down. And these are all free phones, food cards, medical. But he doesn't change, and the growth grows, and things continue to happen. So we've got to figure out a way to hit the root cause, and I'm not entirely sure that North Star is hitting that root cause, which is a heart issue, it's a drug issue, it's a mental issue, and we've got to figure out a way, and I think we can in our community, to help the people in this community and actually set an example for the people out in there, saying we can make a difference. Salvation Army made a difference for a while, then they kind of started getting flooded, and the government kind of stepped in and kind of going different directions, and now we're not seeing those differences made nearly as much as we should in these organizations. And my heart breaks for my brother, and it breaks that I can't look out there and see a North Star for him to look to in the sky, because it's just a handout, and it's continuing his situation. And to me, it's a dark hole, and to him, those little bits of charity and kindness, they're comfort at the time, but it doesn't change the situation he's in. And part of that situation is by choice, and a lot of people are out there by choice. And we have a hard time focusing on people in need that can use the help when we encompass an entire swath. I'm not sure what the cost of the homeless situation is in Sedro-Woolley alone, within our city limits, or even Sedro-Woolley County. I'd want to say we had the children, the Family Promise present the amount of children that were in our community, and they were suggesting 180, almost 10% of our school system, right? And I'm like, how does that make sense? Well, they're living in different homes, they're here, they're there, but actually kids on the streets, or parents or adults on the streets in tents, homeless without a way out, what is that, and what does that cost to us? The 40% is 108,000. Could we start collecting some money, have a 10-year outlook, and maybe get one of those centers at the Swift area as a mental health, and drug rehabilitation for people who are changing, and get placement for them? Is there things we can do to make a difference in people's lives and see an active change? I don't want to see this problem grow, and I sure as heck don't want to see any other brothers or sisters go through that. Right? And I'll tell you what, and I know some of you guys know what it's like. It's heartbreaking, and it sucks. And we're seeing that with drug addiction. We're seeing that with homelessness. We're seeing that with people giving up hope. And if we have a way out, that would be awesome. I just don't know that North Star has shown me that they are the North Star for people like my brother.
Anyone else?
Are there any other options to spend the money on? Because we're teed up with North Star here, but what else can we spend the 40% on?
So this is Charlie, just weighing in. You would probably be looking at least from a service provision perspective, if you wanted to spend, the up to 40% on providing services at the same providers in the region that North Star is looking at. Family Promise, for example, comes to mind, so we're providing them 1406 funds as well. So you would have the ability to maybe direct those funds a little bit more, but there's also a regional effort going on, and we wouldn't necessarily be integrated with that or coordinated with that. The other option would be, you've got all of these funds, and you Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the VOA is actually, they have a housing project going on, which is what you're going to be hearing about regarding the capital funding that we're going to ask you to be looking at. But they are also going to be building different housings for veteran and also for those who, whose income level is like, their AMI is at like 30%. So there are those options as well. But back to North Star, they're involved in that. They're doing that. That's part of what they're doing already. And kind of the beauty of that is that they are the ones who are doing the administrative cost. It doesn't cost us anything to do it. We're allowing them to take the funds and serve the people within our community and around our community. They are greatly involved. Yeah.
So we can't like give more to Family Promise?
We could if she could use it. That's part of, that would be a conversation that we'd have to have with Family Promise.
And
But she applies to North Star for funding.
Right, so it's
So,
like,
yeah.
why don't we just cut out the middleman here?
I think that would be a mistake. I think if you're not at the table, part of a collaborative countywide effort, you're going to be missing out on opportunities for joint funding for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's difficult to, I mean, we don't have any capital projects here that I'm aware of besides
We
Family
don't.
Promise. And we have our citizens being provided some of that housing in different towns. And if we're not, again, part of the conversation, then I think we're sort of going on our own. And I don't see the wisdom in that, though I do strongly support continuing to fund the Oasis Teen Center, DV-SAS, and Family Promise. I think those should be highly recommended for what we put our money to.
Councilwoman Caston.
Thank you. As I've said in the past about North Star and supporting low barrier groups and things such as that, and I agree with what I'm hearing up here from Nick and Sarah, but I don't want to have us try and reinvent the wheel. We've got this North Star is the end all. It's going to solve all of our problems, and we end up like Oregon, Portland, or Seattle, when we could make a big impact here with a lot of money, cutting out the middleman and writing a check to organizations that are making a difference here for us, that are not low barrier. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Burns.
Am I reading this right? They had a $3.2 million budget for North Star?
Yeah.
So we have 100,000, 108. There's a substantial difference there in resources. Working together makes it so that we have more possibilities. On our own, we can do part of one project, maybe, depending on what we pick. I agree that we should be helping people get on their feet and on their own. I don't want to see a perpetual support system for people where it's just an endless loop. I want to see a program that finds out why they're on the street, finds a solution for them, gives them a path to success that they have to work for, giving them the tools needed so that they can get a job and get a roof over their head. I can't think of the last time that I worked somewhere where a person came in who was homeless, who looked homeless, applied for a job and got one. It's really tough for people who haven't had a shower, who don't have clean clothes, to go find a job. And everybody makes mistakes. There's plenty of people in our community who are one paycheck, one disaster, one cancer diagnosis from losing everything. And I understand that there's people out there who are on drugs who don't want help, who want to be on drugs, who don't care about where they are. Those aren't the people I'm trying to save here, or trying to help. I'm trying to help those people that want to get back on their feet, that made a mistake, that something went wrong, and they just need a little bit of light and somebody to help them get back up there and have a shot at it. And if I thought we had the funds to do that on our own, I'd be much more open to it. But I just don't see that $100,000 going real far, considering all the challenges that we would have. I mean, if you want to help somebody with drug rehab, That's a deeply expensive program. If you want to help somebody with educational, if you want to put roofs over heads, I mean, $100,000, how long does it take to buy a house in Sedro-Woolley with $100,000? If we put that away for 5 years, now we've got a single-family home. We don't have something that's going to house a reasonable number of people. I know we're not looking to long-term house most of these people. The point is to get them on to the next step in life. But I just don't see how us going out on our own is going to solve much of anything. And I do appreciate wanting to keep it in Sedro-Woolley. I would love to see the dollars stay here, come back here, however that works. But my goal is to make sure that we help as many people as possible who want the help and will actually do something to help themselves.
Thank you.
I would agree with that, and that's been my argument quite a long time, is we don't have a pie chart separating out the different types of reasons of homelessness. Was it trauma from the war? Was it a sickness in the family or a death of loved ones? Was it mental illness? Was it loss of job and unable to regroup? Was it transientness, just wanting to float around and be a wanderer? Was it drug use, just wanting to float around and use drugs? Or was it drug addiction, which is separate than drug use? It seems like since we usually encompass homelessness in one big swath, a lot of the people who really need it get missed out. There was a video that North Star presented before us when they first came in, and they showed a gentleman who just got out of prison, and he needed a hand up, and he got a hand up, and he was so appreciative of it, and then he turned around and got a job and got on with life. And they showed another girl who had no desire to get a hand up. She was saying, you need to keep supporting me. You guys need to take responsibility for all of us. You need to do this. And they were in a soft barrier unit. And so that person had no intentions of getting out and then contributing back in the same way the other gentleman did. So being able to differentiate, as far as being homeless and move out of it, me and my wife, we hopped on a bus, we moved to Madison and lived in a tent. And tried to get a house in a storage unit, couldn't quite do it. But immediately when I got there, living in a tent, I got a job. She went and got a job a couple of days later. I was working, bringing home food from the restaurant, living in a tent. We did that for probably a month until we were able to save up enough money to get into a room. From that room, we went into an apartment and shared an apartment, and we worked our way up. Not knowing people, and that wasn't the only time that we've done that either. If you have a desire and a good work ethic, you will survive for your family and for yourselves. And so hope is a big part of that, but also differentiating the people who want to get the help and allowing those resources. 3.2, is that all of Skagit? I would imagine. That's a Skagit County organization. There's 125,000 people. It's about roughly 10%. We're 10% of that, and we're putting in about 250. The 108 is 40%, so roughly 250. So 10% of that is coming from our populace. So it makes sense in numbers that we would be contributing that much. But how big is our homeless problem? Now, we don't want to ignore other people. Like Burlington is a mecca because there's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of dollars spent. So it's easier to be there with the sign and then have resources to agencies. Mount Vernon, kind of. There's more populous. LaConner, not so much, not a big community. Anacortes, kind of. But you're looking at where the populace will grow, where those agencies support those individuals, and then people who notice that go there and they take advantage of the system. And that group grows and grows. And so that's why we're not seeing any city ever produce a metric of reduced homeless problem using government agencies. And that's the challenge. And I think we're kind of in a rock and a hard spot. We got to help people, and we have money set aside because somebody said we got to take from the taxpayers to give it to them. But we got to focus on who needs that help. And the heart issue, the drug issue, the root causes of why are these people homeless?
A good portion of them have mental health issues.
Yeah, no, very true.
There's a lot of mental health, and sometimes they are not as composed as you and your wife were and are, and had the ability to pull yourself out. People who have mental health oftentimes don't even understand that they need to continue taking medications. These are people who need our love and compassion, and they need to have someplace safe to live. I can tell you that I have spoke with those who are working with the homeless who are living on the street, and they are burning out because they're watching people die because there's not enough places for them to go.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I can appreciate, you can feel about North Star the way that you ever choose to, but I know what I have witnessed is that we are doing everything that we can to provide not just the Band-Aid, but to get people where they need to go and to get the help. The Behavioral Health Center out here, just west of town here, we're going to build another one. And the beauty of that is, and a lot of funding from the legislatures regarding that. Sarah, you were asking, where are we going? So we have worked with them on that. There'll be a place there where officers will be able to drop off those who are in great need, those who can get medical attention right away.
So there's a little bit of a growth in the mental instability and the mental illness of people. And you have a master's in psychology, you've done counseling, you've worked volunteer work at hospitals, you've done a lot of admirable work, which led you to this North Star because it's the compassion in your heart that wants to see people not suffer. Most people don't want to see people suffer, hopefully. A lot of people in our community do not want to see people suffer. And that's a human instinct. But it seems like this challenge is growing. So like you said, 3.2 million is not going to go super far if 250 for our 10% won't go far. How would 3.2 go that far for 125? Not only that, but without that root cause, like you're saying, that Band-Aid, we sure don't want to just focus on the Band-Aid because those people are suffering watching each other die, watching each other get lost in drugs, seeing these sores start to fester, not having any health ability besides what's provided for by the government. And they do fairly all right for them. I know that my brother had lost his colon and his intestines, so he has a colostomy bag, and he's in a tent, and it's very hard, right? That's not good for him. But it's also one of those things where there's so many resources that can go out. And to see a group growing in misery, we've got to stop and look into our heart and say, us helping and helping and helping is going to eventually just erupt in a bigger group, more people suffer. How do we slow or reverse this? And that's what I'm really focused on lately. That's where my heart is focused on.
Absolutely, and that's the question that should be asked, and that's the question that we are asking, and those are the attempts that we are making. But you're absolutely right about that, Nick. You're absolutely right. And talking about the 3 million, we actually needed 6 million. I sat on the board when we were trying to figure out how much money is going to go into mental health, how much money is going to go into recovery, how much money is going to go into transitional housing, how much money is going to go into shelters, seasonal shelters and seasonal shelters, how much money is going to go into stabilized housing, making those, because I, like you, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, yes, there are going to be people who are going to be helped, but there's a swath of people that will not be helped because we don't have the funding for it. So the attempt is to do what we can now, and I see us as a city being able to do that. We can be part of the solution, work towards part of the solution. But, yeah.
I want to add something about, I think we're paying for some of the mistakes of the past.
Yes. Yes.
I have a friend who's an attorney, he's older than me, and he has an office in downtown Bellingham, and he said he never saw homeless people in the streets of Bellingham until Northern State closed.
Right.
So that was a direct effect. And then the theory, as they closed those mental hospitals across the country, because of abuses and lawsuits, was that folks with mental health issues would then go into the community, get their meds, but that didn't work. Many of them live under bridges. And when you add drugs, it's called dual diagnosis, as you know, then you're talking about somebody, and some of the mental health issues that, you literally are intractable. One of the leading experts on schizophrenia in the world is at Western Washington University. And I asked her once, I said, are there good meds for it? She said, there's pretty good meds for bipolar not for schizophrenia. So, you know, if you're, and I've been around people who are in full-blown schizophrenia, they don't even know where they are often. So, you know, to expect a person like that to go, you know, apply for a job or to look presentable and not start talking about some conspiracy theory is you got to get them there. And sometimes you never do. And then you add the extremely powerful combination of fentanyl to mental illness, and you've got a potent problem that I guarantee you is not going to get better in this community. It's just going to get worse. And I think a collaborative effort to address it is far wiser than piecemeal attempts that will only go so far.
Yeah, drugs are a bad thing. We can all agree on that. And Councilwoman Diamond, I also agree with the concerns that she brought up about low barrier housing. If you guys pay attention to the Martha's Place that they built in Mount Vernon, a really nice apartment complex for permanent transitional housing. I think in the last month, there's been 2 fires set by people who live in there in their own units. The police are there every day. And when we talk about, it seems like when you kind of sift through everything, it seems like one of the main goals of North Star is to, I was looking through here earlier and I can't seem to find it anymore, but I read it, I think yesterday, was one of the things was identify public parcels. And I think one of the reasons for that is to build more buildings on them for permanent housing. There is no sustainability there. All of this money is coming from the taxpayers, going towards people to build permanent housing that they in turn are paying little to nothing for. We're asking of our citizens and all of us, because we live here in Sedro-Woolley, we're being taxed to death. In our Public Works Committee meeting tonight, we're talking about having to raise our garbage rates halfway through the year. And if we're gonna be using this money, again, I want to use it here in Sedro-Woolley for the people who are paying the sales taxes here in Sedro-Woolley, since this is what most of it's coming out of. I want to see high barrier stuff. If you're on drugs and you can't get off drugs, you know, there's alternative treatment for things like that. You can't help somebody that doesn't want it. That's just a fact. I mean, you can forcibly make them get off of drugs by putting them in custody and putting them through treatment. But another example, I don't know if North Star is affiliated with the Friendship House. Are they? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, so you're familiar with the First Step Center in Burlington. Me and my crew built that, and we continue to maintain it. There's several highly paid people who work there on their administration staff, and they're funded $500,000 a year just to cover salaries. And that is the lowest barrier housing of all. People, you walk in there to work on stuff, and people are sitting in their little units, the pallet shelters they call them, and they're smoking crack, they're smoking meth, there's needles everywhere. You go to work on the different plumbing buildings and you have to unclog a toilet and you're snaking it out and you're pulling needles up and out of it. There's needles in the shower drains. The low barrier stuff, it has to stop. So we need to either advocate in Olympia, we need to get representatives out of office who think that doing drugs are good. And we have to fix the drug issue. Mental health it's another thing. I have, you know, family that's been affected by mental health too, not drug related, but from what I've seen and what I deal with every day, it's been my experience that a good portion of it is drug-induced mental health, because you'll run into a person one day and they'll be out of their mind, and then the next day they'll have somewhat of there'll be some kind of a human inside of them. And, you know, it's because they came down off of what they were on. It happens all the time. We see it all the time. I can't I can't advocate for giving money to a place that's going to be low barrier. Like what was funded for Martha's Place and what's funded for the First Step Center. And we keep throwing good money at a bad solution.
So that's one piece. I agree with you. It's one piece of what's happening, but what about the transitional housing and the permanent housing and the shelters that we're providing and the mental health that we're providing and the recovery that we're providing? I mean, those are, I agree, the First Steps is one slice of the pie, but it's not the whole pie. It's just one piece, and there's so many other pieces that are involved in this. And you know, and I acknowledge exactly what you're saying as far as the situation that sometimes arises. We've had this discussion in North Star. We realize, we're learning just like everybody else, we realize some people aren't ready for permanent housing yet. They're not ready for that. So those are people that we need to find other solutions for them. I guess they're still human beings. They're still human beings, and I love what Nick had to say about hope. There always has to be hope. And if we do not believe that we can work together, identify our mistakes, make those corrections, try to be brave and try something new, and if it works, it works. If we need to tweak it, we tweak it. I think that it takes people of courage and people who really want to see a change to step forward and be willing to invest in something, even if it's not an organization like North Star. We still need to invest in something. And I love what Joe had to say as far as combining our funds. We all know that if you have partners, and you can get more done, and you can help a lot more people if you're combining resources. So that's another beauty of North Star. But yes, go ahead.
I do not believe in funding the North Star project when they are still putting funds towards organizations that are low barrier and keep, in my eyes, that system going. I would rather take it in our own hands and give it to the organizations that are not doing that. That's why I'm not for North Star, because they do supplement money to these low barrier entities. That's just my.
And Madam Mayor, if I may. So I just want to, I want to admire you and the whole entire council for having the discussion. This is not an easy discussion, and to have opposing views and different kind of perspectives and different ideas presented in a discussion can sometimes be difficult to have. And this has been a very good discussion, because this is a problem that permeates the whole country and nation in a big way. And some of these are big topics that, you know, a lot of politicians, they don't even want to mention. They're like, we got to be able to do this. I know that some of the hardest things for people to do is to let people hurt themselves sometimes. And I don't want to say that in the wrong way. It's like a parent will eventually come to the point where if I take care of you your whole life, I will be gone and you won't have any understanding of life. Sometimes, and I've had to do that with in my own situation with my brother, is, you know, you've got to figure this out. It breaks my heart, turn around, straight face, close the door, break down in tears, but I have to let him figure this out, because if I keep helping him, it's going to be detrimental to him and everybody else. And so that is a very difficult thing, especially for people with high levels of compassion and EQ, people that have a deep concern for human beings and human life, to be able to sit there and say, I love you so much, I have to let you go and do this. There's a lot of people who want to get up and go, and we have to recognize that. They want to succeed in life. They just need to get on their feet. The drugs got a hold of them. Mental illness got a hold of them. This got a hold of them, and they're willing to come out of that. But then there's people that if we help everybody, if we're like, well, this doesn't work, we've got to find a way to help everybody, there's real people who will suffer at our hands because we're helping others where they really need it. And I've realized that in life. It's not an easy thing to do. That's a pain that I would wish on nobody, but it's a reality of what we must do. So great conversation, great topic, and I do admire that.
Okay. Are there any other comments at all regarding this? This is a first read. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, Nick kind of got me going here. I've made a few trips to Florida and trips to New Orleans to get my mother-in-law and brother-in-law out of mental institutions. And it was kind of interesting because over a period of time, I got my mother-in-law to the right doctor, and it was like day or night. Her last 15 years of her life were her best years. Whereas my brother-in-law, doctor after doctor after doctor, never got anywhere, and he eventually took his own life. So you're not going to save everybody, but you gotta try to save them. But you don't want to try to save them like they do in Seattle, build a $60 million building, and tell them you can go ahead and drink and do all that in there. That's not the way to go, and look at all the money that was wasted. But if you actually are helping people, you can actually help some, and you're not going to save them all. But it's a real drag to get on an airplane and fly to Florida and go to the mental institution. And the thing I did, which I thought was smart ahead of time, I talked to somebody here to find out what should I do when I get there. Because in the hospital, I saw that she was there involuntarily, and some guy that the court appointed would come in and sign a piece of paper every day. He didn't have a clue what's going on. But when I got her out of there and got her to a doctor in Tampa, we happened to hit the right doctor, and it made all the difference in the world. Going to New Orleans didn't help my brother-in-law. So, but New Orleans, I wanted to say, like Alan was talking about building, monstrosities, I'll just call it. Well, they had the floods in New Orleans, and they didn't rebuild the projects. They started building these little communities, and they're really, really nice, 3 or 4 houses here, 3 or 4, so they're not all put together. They take pride in their new digs, and things are working a lot better without the big projects. So building big buildings ain't gonna, well, can you tell me one that's worked? Instead of projects, they don't work. So, but that's my little bit.
So I am actually quite moved by the honesty and the transparency that some of you have shared regarding family members that you have lost, and those that you have been able to help live the last 15 years of their lives wonderfully, and those who are still really struggling. And I understand that too. I have family members that are alcoholics, drug addicts. Just this last year, actually in the last 5 months, I had a cousin who was murdered, caught up in drugs. So I understand the frustration. What do you do? What do you do? So I thank you for the conversation. I hope you'll give honest consideration to what we're doing here with the 1590 funding, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say when we bring this back. So thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to something a little lighter, the 2025-2026 City Council goals. And Charlie, is still there?
I am still here. Yes, I appreciated the conversation as well by everybody. So thank you all for that on the prior item. Yes, the council's 25-26 goals. So I went back over, looked at the meeting minutes, went back over my notes as well. When I was, and then this was before the strategic planning committee, their last meeting, which I think was last week. The thing I looked for and listened for in the council's discussions were potential action items. And from my experience, it appeared that a lot of those action items fell under your existing goals. And so what I did is I went back to those existing goals, and this is in the packet, went ahead and updated them. And so the main high level goals like increased parks and recreation usage remained. And I'll just walk through these real quick. There was a lot of discussion about the city's website, and I went ahead and updated that because it sounded as if the council's intention was to improve the website functionality and do a better job increasing the visibility of parks and recreation. Specifically mentioned were 3D interactive mapping, better integration of events and rental opportunities, drone footage. So I put those things specifically in there with a deadline to get them done by July 1st. Also, new partnerships, I updated the deadline on that. Been kind of waiting for clear guidance from council on how you want to proceed with that economic development money from ARPA, which we're also going to talk about on the next item here a little bit. But I updated the deadline on that to December 31st, 2025. So we're looking into the 25-26 time horizon at this point with these goals. Some of these things we'll try to get done earlier if we're able to, but we're looking to align the resources, i.e. Budgets, with the action items as much as possible. Granted, if we're using ARPA money for something, we can potentially do it sooner if we're clear on how we want to proceed. Same thing on the next one, working strategically to expand outdoor recreation options. Change the date from October 1, 2023 to December 31, 2025. And that has to do with parks projects generally that we have ongoing, as well as some of the trail projects. And there was also discussion of evaluating the opportunity to expand ball field capacity. So I added that in as a bullet point. So Little League, soccer, and looking at these things within the context of updating the comprehensive plan, because you'll be working on the parks element as part of that. And also there was conversation about developing parks that pay for themselves. And so I included that in there to make sure that we do that. And also to consider use of the floodplain for sports tournaments. And that was all part of that same bullet. And then the last one I included in here, there's been work done and will continue to be done towards better activating the skate park. And so I included the annual skate park competition right now that's scheduled for August 17th of this year that the city is planning to host. Last one is evaluating financial sustainability models for the city's park system. So we've had a fair amount of conversation about, we build parks and do we have the staff to support those parks and the parks maintenance on those parks? And so this is a general statement. Part of it has to do with looking at parks that are self-sustaining. We could look at generating more revenue out of our parks. Some cities have actually leased pads in some of their parks for folks to come in and provide food truck type services and other things. So there's potential lease out space for vendors and things like that could bring some revenue to the park system as well. There are a number of models we could look at. Certainly taxes are always a possibility too, but there are a lot of different things we could look at and discuss there. So I just left it as a general line to make sure that we have that discussion as we continue to build out the park system. That's just my recommendation to you. And I took out the last bullet because it kind of duplicated what was written earlier on. It probably shouldn't have been in there in the first place. So that's all under the parks goal. And wanted to just pause there to see if that sounds accurate for the whole council. If there were other thoughts, I can keep going if you prefer and kind of cover them all, but I built these all under the existing goals. I did make some wording changes to the very last goal related to the comp plan because that goal really is all related to the comp plan as we get into that.
Thank you.
But I'll pause here at parks.
Yeah, Charlie, I'd appreciate that pause. Thanks for doing that. I think that, if we can possibly advance the website, that would be my advice. Because the more that we have something, at least identifying the parks that we have right now, integrated parks, when you're searching online, fun things to do around Washington, and parks keep coming up because Sedro-Woolley's right there, and the website's getting a lot of hits, and it keeps, it's got parks there, park circuit, park this, skate park competition, disc golf. People are going to realize or recognize that Sedro-Woolley does have a lot to offer when it comes to parks, and you'll keep seeing that. And that's a positive association with the name Sedro-Woolley and then Parks and Recreation. That's very positive. And it's something that, I have a hard time picturing other communities I've been to in Washington. Ocean Shores is a kind of a getaway little spot. We won't never want to be like that. But as far as like a getaway to go play disc golf all day, Burlington's got some good spots, but we really have an opportunity with our parks. So that would be my thing, is see if we can advance that website development. It was kind of a hot topic back in 2021. And so we have enough parks right now to advertise it, and then future parks hopes to really start generate some interest and some anticipation for what's to come.
Okay, Councilman Burns?
On that point, actually, one of the things I would really encourage the city to do is looking at the metadata. The way that the website is described to the search engines can really help you pop up closer to the top. That's one of the things that would generate a lot more traffic, is making sure that that's described properly and that you're using the trigger words that are necessary for it to come up, as well as looking at what kind of parameters, let's say, Google Maps uses to highlight. Because if I search for parks, the first thing I come up with Northern State, then it tells me about Hillcrest Park. That's in Mount Vernon. It's not even close to my location, but that's the next one that it suggests, so.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
One of the things I've learned with the things I've done over the years is parks actually have a lot to do with business development and attracting the right kind of things. Parks, transportation is a big deal. So, what you want to do is when you're able is to buy the property for park someday. You want to be real careful. You don't want to jump in and start spending money building parks you can't afford, but you want to buy the property so when you do have the money, you can do it, but you don't want to, jump off a cliff. And like they say, they're not making any more property, so the sooner you can buy property and not develop it, the better off you'll be, and that will have effect on a lot of things you do.
Like the Reed Street, I understand my drive-through with Nate we got that for 25 grand, and it sits there, and it's a wonderful piece of property. In time, it's still really fun, but in time it'll.
One thing about that property, we tried to buy it years ago for $79,000, and the bank said that ain't enough. But here a few years later, you guys bought it for 25. So,
We did.
when the opportunity arises, you want to be able to get the property. You haven't built anything there yet, but you have 10 years, 20 years, 30 years before you have to build it, but you got the property for the future use. So that was a good move.
Anybody else? So it looks like what you're looking for here is, does this, what you have put in writing here, Charlie, does it reflect the city council's goals? Is that what you're looking for, to see if this is on task, or if there is other direction the council would like to provide?
And you paused at the park side, so you're still going through the rest. You just wanted to see if the park was on cue.
That's correct.
Nice. I think from our meeting, we had a lot of discussion about the parks, not the strategic, but toward the end, even though it was a primary focus for our strategic planning, I think we kind of agreed it wasn't the sole focus of the intent, even though it became the top priority. So although it's great for economic development, it's great for the residents to have something in their backyard that's a park and gym for our kids and for us, I think the rest, like you were putting in there, is even just as high of a priority with economic development and housing and traffic.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, thank you. I can move down to the next section if you'd like, improving the city's economy. And really, yeah, the goal tonight is to get feedback on this, see if this is in the ballpark. If it is, and I'm taking some notes on my end to maybe add a little bit more in before I bring it back to you, to maybe clarify a little bit on looking at search engines and opportunities to better market the city's park system that way, as well as perhaps a line about emphasizing parks purchases for holding. So I'll look at a place to drop those in there if the council is amenable to that, and really then would look to bring these back for action with you once you feel comfortable with them, so that we can get them officially adopted, and then we can build the budget to make sure this stuff is included. So that said, moving down to improving the city's economy, same wording initially, but added some sub-bullets to the bullet related to improving public infrastructure that supports economic development and quality of life and provide regular updates to the city council. Under that, added a line about implementation of the Economic Development Action Plan. We've been working on that in planning and business development for a while. We've got another review of that coming up at our next meeting, and would want to bring that back to council at some point when we're ready, and hopefully provide some clarity to how we want to spend the ARPA money and what else we want to prioritize in the future as it relates to economic development. We also have the economic action. Basically, we have the economic element of the comp plan that's going to get updated in the near future. And we see the economic development action plan as being something we can hand off to the consultants once it's adopted for them to work into their considerations and what gets drafted up in the comp plan as well. Improving signage within the community. That item was discussed quite a bit at the council's retreat, so I included a specific line item about that in here. It's also in the Economic Development Action Plan. So that's in there. And then going down a little further, many of these things I must mention, there are things that we have completed that I just took out. So like we said, we were going to do a focus group for listening to businesses in the community, and we were going to use that input to create an economic development action plan. We've done that. So I took that out and just kind of started fresh with taking some of those items out. But we had a number of items that were further into the future. Those all remain in here. And then the new items that came from your discussion that you had at the retreat, those are all in here as well. So moving on down, looking at the city's revenue trends and providing a report to council. I included that in there by the middle of next year. So there was some discussion about growing our revenues, the importance of that, the critical importance of that, and being able to sustain the services that we provide. So I thought that would be a good exercise for us to look at. And I think it came up in the council's deliberations as well. But what's our 5-year, 10-year trend on sales tax? What's our 5-year, 10-year trend on property tax growth? Things like that could be helpful for us to be able to look ahead as well as better understand our current position. And then within that, developing strategies to grow the city's sales tax revenues as well as increasing hotel motel revenues.
Charlie,
can I
those
both down there as well from council discussion. So that's what I had under the economic development section. The prior version had a lot more about developing the economic development action plan and how we get there. And this is more looking towards moving forward with it.
Hey, Charlie, I just had a question. Could you remind me how we increase hotel motel revenue? I mean, if they don't build new hotel motels, we don't increase revenue.
Yeah, there was a discussion at Planning and Business Development in the past with some of our economic development partners about potentially trying to attract more hotels to develop in the community. We do have one on Trail Road right now that's under construction, but that's how you get hotel. There are two ways you get hotel motel money. One, you need to have hotels and motels. Or registered, Airbnbs and things like that. Or, you need to make sure those things are as full as they can be. And that's part of what you're trying to do with your hotel motel revenues. They literally call it in the kind of common way of saying it with the state, putting heads on beds. So we're looking, when we fund marketing through the chamber or special events, that's really the focus, is how do we bring people to town? How do we get them to stay in our hotels? And then, of course, when they do that, we get more revenue from that. So it's growing us as a destination for travelers to come and essentially spend money, contribute to our economy, be a part of that. But that is, you build up at some point a critical mass of hotel motel revenues where you're able to do significantly more with those than we're able to do right now. And that's something I would recommend. We look at sports tournaments and other things. They're all interrelated. If we had more hotel motel revenues, we'd be able to do more of that promotion, more of that activity. In one city I worked in, we had somebody doing marketing and communications for the city full time, and half that position was funded with hotel motel revenues. So there are ways to get resources in terms of staffing as well that can really help push these things for the city and for the community.
All right, thank you.
So,
Okay. Are there any other questions for Charlie? Is that it, Charlie, or do you have other things that you'd like to share?
I got one more section at the end, and that's it's just some minor edits, but the last one was talking about the growth model for the city, how we want to grow and looking to grow towards the north, and primarily focusing on single-family residential homes, looking at some missing middle housing, some infill. So there was sort of a strategy we put into words in the last goal-setting session. I just included on the front of that, completing the comprehensive plan on time and under budget, and really that discussion is going to happen in the comprehensive planning process. And then I added one last bullet at the bottom because there were discussions about impact fees and reviewing the city's impact fees. And my recommendation on that is the city's infrastructure plans actually determine what the needs are going to be for the city in terms of what we need to build. For example, if we need to expand the wastewater plant, it's our infrastructure plans that help us determine when that's appropriate, what that's going to cost, those types of things. And then our impact fees are set to those infrastructure plans. So it actually starts with growth. If we have to accommodate a certain amount of growth, where are we going to put it? What's it going to cost us in terms of building the infrastructure, having it built? And then that leads us to what should our impact fees be in order to pay for some of that infrastructure that we're not able to recover in other ways. So the review of the impact fees is best done once our infrastructure plans are updated, once we have our comp plan generally in place. And so that's my recommendation. So I put that as the last bullet there, that we would do that upon completion of the comprehensive plan.
Councilman Henderson?
Thanks for bringing that last bullet point up, Charlie, because that's something that's kind of been keeping me from sleeping at night, thinking about how we're going to pay for our sewer plant and everything else. All of our infrastructure is the development needs to pay for development, essentially. So the connection fees and the impact fees are something that I'd like to definitely dive into and take a closer look at in the future. So I appreciate you putting that on there. Thanks.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, on that, I was thinking about that when I read it, and somehow we got ourselves underwater. And so it's almost like we're at a state where it's acceptable to develop our infrastructure as we grow. So our infrastructure is dependent on our growth. And so, and we're a little bit lacking in the infrastructure we have currently. So the way to fix it is by growing more, but then that's going to cause us to need more infrastructure, which would be more growth. So we run into this revolving door, and it would be very cool to get a set budget at some point where we have surplus and we have basically that ER&R for the city, right? Where it's not as dependent on growth for our infrastructure to be developed better as technology becomes better, or as we have more needs just with the residents that we have, more power, more phone lines, more things like that, sewage and whatnot. So I think that would be something that I would aim for. And I understand where you're going from this. This is what we got in front of us, but it would be really nice to get to a point where we're not chasing the tail.
I agree. Okay.
Yeah, I do think we're going to get much deeper into these conversations throughout the comp plan process, and certainly as we get into impact fees as well. There are a lot of different things that go into it. There are a lot of dynamics at play. But yeah, appreciate the point, and it's a common discussion in every community.
Yeah.
Who pays for growth and how is it financed, and it's not just growth in the building of the infrastructure, but then there's the ongoing upkeep and maintenance of the infrastructure as well. And then what happens when, and I'm not saying this is happening, but what happens when a neighboring community builds a huge development, nearby, and that actually ends up loading onto your road system, and you're not able to charge fees to support what needs to be done there. And so some of the modeling struggles to deal with growth that occurs in the county or growth that occurs in other communities and how that loads on our road system. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this process as well. It's pretty complicated.
Okay. All right, so if there isn't anything else, this is, we'll be bringing this back in front of you. Did you get what you believed you needed, Charlie, to help polish this and bring it back to the council?
I did. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
All right, so one last item for the night, and Charlie, you're back on. The authorize the 2024 Skagit County Economic Development Grant request. This is an update, I understand?
Yeah, it's a request to the council and an update as well. So we have an opportunity to apply for Skagit County's Economic Development Grant. And it is up to a $500,000 grant opportunity. It's a maximum award. We don't have a lot of time. I got the notice just like a couple of weeks ago. And so I've been trying to work on different ideas. I looked at, it has to be something that's included in our comp plan. So I took a look at our economic element of our comp plan. And there is a policy statement in the back of that that talks about sprucing up our downtown, which is pretty general and hopefully specific enough for this to be considered. But one of the things that we've talked about in our economic development strategy is our historic murals. And as we've been looking at them, you can certainly make the argument that some of the murals are in such poor condition that they detract from economic development, that they kind of show a city that has not cared for them. And so the proposal that we've been working on, and that I wanted to talk with council tonight about, is what if we were to repaint those historic murals? And so we had an intern go out and photograph them for us, and that's included in the packet, and come up with the rough dimensions of them. And so you can see those pictures in the packet, and some of them look better than others. There are 8 murals out there. One of the murals he didn't recommend that we repaint because it's recently done. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a historic mural. That last one anyway, I think that's a different mural. It's one I wasn't even aware of. But some of the ones that are definitely in rougher condition are really hard to identify even what they're trying to portray. So this proposal would basically repaint the murals. And there's a mural ordinance the city has. I included a copy of that as well, I think. Or I provided a link, one or the other. My apologies if I didn't. But yeah, there's a mural ordinance the city has. We need to follow that. We essentially need to keep these in a certain theme that they're in. We'd love to maybe add a little more color to them. Hopefully we can do that within the ordinance itself. But to repaint these and reinvigorate them would be a boost for the downtown, and would be another piece of the puzzle. We've done a lot of improvements in the downtown of late through the grant program. We're doing the sidewalk project, painting the streetlight posts. So a number of things to try to inject some additional life into the downtown. So essentially, we would be, when I went through this project with the intern and looked at the square footage of our murals, I determined that the cost of repainting them would be about $187,000. And we would benefit from having a match in this grant. And so one idea I had was in our Economic Development Action Plan, we do talk about the murals. And I know it's not adopted by the full council at this point, but it's some thinking that's been done. And a match from ARPA funds would be helpful in bringing down our total grant request, but also showing some skin in the game for the city if we want to move forward with this at all. And so our grant request at that point would be $137,000. We have funds remaining that would still remain in the ARPA allocation for economic development at about $90,000. So there'd still be room to do more work there. And that's really the request tonight. It's kind of twofold. One is the council okay with us moving forward with this grant request to the county? And if so, would you be up for providing a match? And our recommendation is $50,000. And that's a little bit of background on it. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but we wanted to get this before you because it is due on May 20th, and I'm going to be on vacation for a bit as well, and need to get this in by May 8th, which is next Wednesday.
Hey, Charlie, when do remaining ARPA funds sunset? I mean, go away?
It's complicated to answer your question. So right now, they have to be expended by the end of 2026. And they have to be obligated by the end of this year.
Right.
And the federal government wasn't clear on what obligation meant until late in 2023. And then even when they tried to provide clarity on that, it still wasn't crystal clear. So we were asking a lot of questions of a lot of different agencies for a while. And we've come up with a strategy to work on our ARPA funding situation for obligating those funds. So what the county's doing, and we did the exact same thing as the county. Early on, we needed to determine if our funds could be counted as lost revenue. And we did that formally. So basically, we qualified to be able to do that. And what they mean by lost revenue is that we basically lost revenue during the pandemic. These funds were provided, and we were able to basically account for them as lost revenue. It removes a lot of the strings that are attached to the funds, but we weren't clear if that was enough to be considered an obligation. What the federal government did say about obligation is obligation means that they have to be under contract to be expended, which is a pretty formal way of doing it. So the strategy that we have is, the county is doing this as well, is to have a budget amendment in front of council, likely in the next couple of months, where we would take our remaining ARPA funds. They're sitting in a separate fund right now. While we've counted them as lost revenue and reported them that way, the county is going to essentially spend them through the budget to make sure that there's no question whether or not they were obligated under the federal definition. And we're going to recommend doing the same thing. So essentially what would happen is we can spend them on, because they're lost revenue, we can spend them on payroll, and we could spend them on anything. We would spend them through the budget. We're going to not overspend. We're not going hog wild or anything by doing this. We'll end up with a bigger fund balance. So we'll end up with more money essentially in our checking account, if you will, at the end of the year. And then we will, in the 25 budget, put those funds somewhere into a reserve fund of some sort that we will essentially treat as a strategic reserve, and then continue our work with these funds, or funds that are like these funds that came out of our fund balance. But they won't have the same strings attached as they had previously. They're no longer ARPA funds at that point. So that's our plan. That's going to be our recommendation to council. And I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but it is a complicated situation.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Diamond?
The murals are on mostly privately owned businesses and buildings. Who's actually responsible for taking care of the murals in that case? And if it is the private property owner, how's the city plan to go about making that connection and partnership?
That's a great question. I think, the thing we have talked about doing, Nikki and I, with approaching these businesses is we will go to them and we will actually have an agreement with them to be able to repaint the mural on the side of their building. And you're right, these are private properties for the most part. And as a part of that, we should include something about maintenance. So I think that's a really good point, and I'll add that to my to-do list. But essentially, we'll have an agreement with them to maintain these or at least keep these, in place. Given the grant funding expended on them, the city's funding, ARPA funding that could be expended on them, and so on. So we'll have to see what we can work out on that. I don't have a real succinct answer for you on it.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I just think it's really important now that we're looking at potentially reviving something, is that the way that we want to go forward, right? What is Sedro-Woolley saying now? Those were done a long time ago. They could potentially be played out. We could use this opportunity to set ourselves apart, not necessarily rebrand, but think about what we want. There's a lot of really awesome places that you go to, and it's like greetings from Sedro-Woolley, and they're taking pictures with that because it's an opportunity. I really think we need to be thoughtful about it and have a cohesive we've got the Logger Rodeo, they've got their carvings. A lot of those are outdated. She updated them to make them look more aesthetically pleasing, but there's incredible artists that maybe we swap some out. Start thinking about how we want this to look. So that's what I'm thinking.
I think that's so good. I love that. But something I would encourage the council to do, which was kind of when we bumped up against it, was kind of like, oh, so that's why we're going to bring it in front of you. But that is the mural ordinance. So you may want to do a read through that, and that would be great to hear, any kind of insider changes, how we could kind of brush that up and change it, especially given what you're just saying, because I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying. Councilman Koch, or do you?
Alan was going to go.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Charlie, so this would leave us 90,000 with funds allocated for economic development. What is the rest of our ARPA balance? And this is kind of maybe a little bit of a sidebar, but we have some other expenditures coming up for things that aren't economic development. And I was wondering how much we had left in those where it's earmarked for other things. I'm sorry,
I don't
sorry to
have
get off
that.
topic on this particular subject, but it just got me
No
thinking.
worries. I don't have that off the top of my head because we've got some things, we have an ARPA plan. So we have a plan for spending all the money. And some of the money is tied up in things like Olmsted Park, for example. The funds haven't been expended yet because that project is still getting underway, but they will be. Or it's always up to the council if you wanted to do something different, but we're pretty well committed to that project in a variety of ways. But we can bring you back a report on that at the next meeting. Happy to do that. I know that Kelly's got that information pretty handy. Even though she won't be here, we can put a report in the packet. I just don't have that at my fingertips right now.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So, on part of that, Councilman Henderson, is we do have the strategic council fund for some of those to bring before the council. So if it's there, I believe there is that. On the murals, I really love what Councilman Kessie said about that, because I was thinking, is there a way to have some sort of like blast from the past competition? The city votes for the nicest cars, and then we're able to utilize those cars on one of those murals, or kind of immortalize some award winner out of that. And it kind of draws in the community involvement or engagement. I think that could be something. The town is looking better. I do want to tell you the museum looks freaking awesome every time I drive down that road. I'm just like, so good job. And it would be neat to see the community also involved in those murals, if there's a way for them to kind of to recognize something cool and then have that put up there every time they go by. They'd kind of know it. Or get a 3D artist where you're kind of moving around and it looks.
Go ahead.
I just have a question for Charlie, because if some of the buildings did not want to, could it be something that we could also cover it, so at least it's aesthetically pleasing and you've covered up what you had done in the past and there was no follow through? Is that not okay because of how things, how does that work?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it would be separate from the grant. The grant, and I'm just taking notes here because I'm going to reshape the grant, I think, a little bit based on this conversation, rather than say we're going to repaint them. Exactly. I don't think we want to tie ourselves down that much. We probably want to just say we're going to paint 7 murals of this rough size and dimension within the downtown. And that could include, painting over murals at appropriate locations, but it's better in a sense because it's more flexible too. We may find a property owner isn't willing to work with us on doing a big project on their wall, but maybe somebody else is. So we could have a little more flexibility that way. To answer your question about, what about painting over the ones we have, maybe not even, putting anything there. I think that's something we could always approach the property owners about, as long as they're willing to let us do that. And it would be in their best interest to do so. That wouldn't need to be a part of this. I think that would just be the cost of paint. We could get after that pretty easily. And we could potentially use ARPA funds for that as well, just a small amount.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Burns.
I like the idea of possibly changing them up. One thing we might have to consider is part of it for the mural rules that we currently have requires it to be pictures related to the 1890s to the 1930s era. So maybe some changes required if you want to do anything different. I think that the project's a good idea. I can't tell you how many people have told me we need to repaint those, or why haven't you repainted them? When are you going to repaint them? So I'm inclined to say that we should approve Charlie applying for this with the stipulation that he will change the wording to say that we will be painting 7 murals, some replacements, leaving it vague enough that we can do what we like after being approved and have the opportunity to change as necessary.
Okay, is that a motion you're putting forth, Councilman Burns?
Sure, if you can clarify a motion from that, I'll give it. I'll make a motion that we approve this with the change of allowing flexibility in what is painted.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion by Councilman Burns, seconded by Councilman Koch, with a change in the wording to state allowing flexibility in the murals. Actually, what I heard you say, which I really liked, the first thing that you said was that we would be painting 7 murals with some of them being repainted.
And could I ask a question? Could the subject matter to address what's been brought up be changed on some of them? They're literally gone.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe our rampaging elephant. I mean, all the children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are plenty of things we could have future conversations
Yeah.
on that they don't have to have for us to get to let Charlie apply.
We'll have to go,
Just,
yeah, we'll have to go through and redo
Councilman
the
Kesty?
entire.
Yeah.
Is 7 locking us down? Could it just be open-ended? Or do we have to say a number of the murals that we are? Just that it's a mural grant to help beautify or cover and not say a number so we have more leeway? Is there any verbiage that could?
That could be, I know that we had the discussion, something that Charlie and I talked about is that we have just a rough estimate of what it's going to cost. So we may only be able to do 5. We may not even be able to do 7. So, yeah, that's. Yeah, up to 7.
Yeah, I'll soften the language, give us maximum flexibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I think it's helpful to share what's here, just so whoever reads our grant can get an opportunity to see that. And that it's our intention to, refresh, repaint, paint over, but otherwise inject new murals into the downtown. And yeah, I used a pretty conservative number. I was looking at metrics for what the cost of a mural, to paint a mural is, and it was between $25 and $50 per square foot. I used 50 because I wanted to make sure that we got the biggest bang for our buck, and with cost inflation and everything else these days, I did not want to be too low. That said, we've reached out to a muralist to see if we can get a better estimate from somebody who does this, and haven't heard back. But yeah, I think we can keep it broad and maybe not even tie ourselves to a number. I'll just share this as background information. This is what our downtown murals look like currently. We would like to, repaint. And it needs to be more than one, I think, to be, to be exciting. But maybe at least 3 or 4, if not, more. I'll try to find the right wording so that we're really clear that we're trying to reinvigorate the downtown through murals, and this grant will help us do, we think, at least probably 5.
Okay, Councilman Henderson, you have a?
Yeah. So the maximum grant award is 500,000, and
Yep.
so 50 is the minimum matching, right?
It's actually not even requiring matching, but matching will help our scoring. So our matching could go up. We could ask for more. We do have those options. And generally speaking, when you apply for grants, the more you ask for, the lower your chances of getting it become. But I think Mayor Johnson might be able to speak to how it is to serve on this committee. She's had that opportunity. She may have some more insight as well there.
Okay, I was just wondering why we weren't going for a bigger amount and doing more projects than just the 7 murals. If the max is 500,000.
Yeah,
We
that's a
could.
really good question. That is a really good question. And just to kind of make you aware, so, yeah, of course, we're not going to be the only ones going out for this. And having sat on the board, I can tell you that there's always way more requests for money than there are for projects. And so Charlie's absolutely right. That's why we encouraged a lower amount. Simply had to do with greater probability of getting the grant. And we really want to see this project move forward, if the council wanted to see it move forward. And so we're trying, as Charlie put it quite well, we're trying to maximize our opportunity here.
So are we only allowed to apply for one grant, or could we put in a multiple grant proposal? And then I think that might lessen the chances of getting the one that we want, though. But yeah, we got some port entries into our community that could be enhanced.
And this is every year, Councilman Lavaca. So every year we can go out, pick a project, go for it. So, but council will need to be savvy as far as making the administration aware of what you want, so that we have plenty of time to apply. This was very last minute. I went to Charlie and I said, I really don't want to see us lose this grant money, this opportunity for this grant money. So we talked, he came back with this opportunity, and I said, yeah, let's go for it. So that's why we're here, and that's why it's a rush.
So would we be able to, I'm just thinking that gas station, right, that's over there, it'd probably be pretty costly, but just taking it down, not replacing it or anything, just a demo. I know it's probably got some chemicals there, and just turn it into a nice flat lot. Would that be something that we can add in or apply for, or
So to purchase the property and.
is it's not even our
That,
property?
you
We
know,
wouldn't even be able
that, yeah.
to not know that. Okay. I knew it wasn't our property, but I didn't know we wouldn't be able to just
So-
go in there and do it.
But there's always discussions to be had like that. I like the way you're thinking.
Yeah, the owner might appreciate that.
We would appreciate it.
Wishful thinking for next year, lights across Metcalf. That's it? Next year? Okay.
I like it. Wish list. Okay. So,
Noted.
so we had a first and a second motion to approve going out for this grant by Burns and Koch. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. All right, fantastic. Got your work cut out for you, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you.
And continue to enjoy the conference and the training that you guys are undergoing tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
With that, we have, our next council meeting is next Wednesday. Before that, prior to that, there's a meeting at 5 o'clock. It's the Public Works Council Committee, and that will be followed by the council meeting at 6 PM. Or, I'm sorry, Public Works Committee? I don't know, that's what it says here. I'm just reading what it says here. You shouldn't. No. I'm sure,
Mayor,
I thought it was
think it's,
strategic, isn't it?
pretty
It's
sure-
supposed to be, it's either
sure
business or
it's- sorry.
strategic. One of them. Okay,
Mayor, I'm pretty sure it's planning and business development.
well, there you are. Okay. So, all right. So with that, one last thing. I skipped over public comment. Do we have public comment tonight?
Bill Murray. Mike Long here. You're talking about the murals. I know there's a couple of them. The other thing is that grant money that I talked about last week. Get a pressure washer. It's called maintenance.
Yeah.
The other one is, I was asking about, tight lies down there, the, Bigfoot. It's like, I asked for the, business license here. Couldn't find one. So it's like, you're supposed to have a business license in Sedro-Woolley. And I'm wondering, if the city doesn't have it, then where is it and what business is it? I know Tight Lies put in for it, but Tight Lies isn't selling anything out of there that I know of. They own the building. And I was told, as a building owner, you could not qualify. You had to have a business. If you own the building and the business, then you could apply for it. And they don't qualify as far as I can see. And the other thing about that is that the people that set that up, that was Charlie and the mayor, I believe. Is that it?
What? Set up what?
Set up the grant money for that?
Actually, the grant money is the formation, the creation of the council here. They're the ones who put the grant together and wrote it. They wrote it themselves, approved it.
That's what I was wondering
Yeah.
about, 'cause don't know. But it doesn't seem right that any one of you would benefit from it. Whether you have a business or spouse in it, you shouldn't be benefiting from it. This is for the public out there. You are not the public anymore when you're up here. You work for us, and it should be public only. Maybe that's my opinion on it. Thank you.
So Charlie, I know that something that we wanted to do was kind of address the questions, those questions that were brought up. So do you have opportunity to do that now? Or do you have any?
Yes, Mayor. I couldn't hear like the beginning. I don't know, probably a minute or two. But I did hear the conversation about the comment about Tight Lies, the owner of the Woolley Market building, and they do have a business that owns the building, and we did check for a business license, and that business does have a business license. That was a part of our due diligence on that grant.
The other question that he had was that some of the people who were applying for the grant, so this is where I thought maybe you might want to give an update, that they do not have brick and mortar. So, for example, the cheerleaders and the football team and whatnot. So do you want to give an update as to where they're at?
Oh, yes. I can give an update on kind of where we are on the current grant requests that we talked about at the last meeting. They are basically leasing space from the city, similar to the museum, for example. But they're, as long as they have the approval of the landlord, which in this case would be the city, or the Sedro-Woolley Youth Football and Cheer, or in the museum's case, we're the landlord there as well. And in the case of a business that rents, they need their landlord building owner's approval as a part of the grant contract. As long as they have that, and they're proposing to do public-facing improvements that we feel meet the grant program that council approves, they're able to move forward with the program the way it's currently established. So just a quick update. I have talked with, I've sent emails to everybody. The Sedro-Woolley Youth Football and Cheer, let them know the outcome of the grant, the lower amount that was approved by council. I've not heard back from them at this point. There were some businesses that didn't have business licenses. One of them, it was the building owner actually applying. That was the MMA business. Building owner understood that situation. And the other one, the Stoneworks business, that one as well was, according to the owner, they understood, and they're planning to get one really soon. And then there's another business that the Ultimate Physiques, that was tied to Cascade Fabrics, followed up with that contractor. I've not heard anything. I'm going to do some additional follow-up work because I'd like to reach the business owner of Cascade Fabrics to see if they want to reshape that grant. But that's what's going on right now. Otherwise, we do have some grants. As soon as Kelly gets back, we have some grants that will go out because we had a number of the recipients get right back to us with some additional information that we need to put the contracts together. And trying to tee all of those up. As I mentioned, I'm going to take some time off and want to make sure I have as many, if not all of those grants out there so that people can get to work as possible before I leave town.
Madam Mayor, if I may, on part of that. Charlie, if I may ask you a question, one of the comments in public comment was about the mortar on the sidewalls. If the building's damaged, or the mortar's damaged, the wall's probably gonna be fine. Would that grant include, or could it include repair or replace the mortar if needed? Is that pretty expensive? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a sense for the cost of that, but yeah, I mean, the way we've written it currently, if somebody came in and said, we want to re-mortar a wall and, here's how it looks currently and here's how it'll look in the future, and it's a lot better look for us from a public facing wall, then I think that would qualify, and I'd certainly recommend approval to council.
Yeah, if we paint it up with a mural and then it starts to break apart in certain areas, it could look pretty raggedy over a short time. So it's a great point.
Yeah,
But working with the owners on that would be good. Councilwoman Kesty?
Thank you. Charlie, could you please help me understand how the cheerleaders in the football, since it wasn't an outward-facing building, or could you help me understand how they got that grant money, why it was okay?
Well, it's
You haven't approved it, you
they're
haven't
doing
approved
some
it yet.
painting. I mean, it's a public space. Their field and their signage. I mean, it's public space. So it's owned by the city. So that was the thought there, that it is public facing in that regard, that the public goes there for, potentially for sporting events.
Yeah.
So that's the rationale there. And then the painting and the signage improvements that they were looking at, those are things that are external hardscape type improvements. So that was the thinking on how they qualify potentially for this grant. As I mentioned, I have not heard from them. So I'm not sure what they're planning to do at this point.
Okay. No.
Now I have all kinds of questions. Because he
yeah.
answered.
Yeah.
That's why you
So,
don't want to answer questions.
no, I'm looking forward to next week. Why don't you bring those questions forward next week and then, or better yet,
What business is in the Tightwise building?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a license?
why don't you go talk to the owners of that? I'm not the owner. I'm not the owner.
You are the owner.
No,
It's your husband.
I'm not on it. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.